All right, everybody, welcome. Really, really nice to be with you. I'm, as Joan was saying, I'm Susan Reade. I teach for Holyoke Community College, and I am a teacher of beginners, like many of you, maybe all of you, close to all of you. So we are in good company. We're among friends here for sure. It looks like we have a couple more people joining us.
I'll keep letting.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much, Joan. So welcome, Bryn. Nice to be with you. Hey there. So just to start out, just acknowledging that today, or maybe yesterday, depends on who you talk to, was the first day of spring. I thought that I would just start out just by asking you, if you would, to just introduce yourself, just say your name, maybe what your role is, and maybe in one or two words, what does spring represent for you? So your name, your role, and in one or two words, what does spring represent for you? And I'm curious to hear. So let's see, Deborah, you feeling up to being the first?
Sure, why not? So my name's Deborah McCoy, and I teach a literacy and low ESL beginning class at Dorcas. And spring means more rain than I wanted, but a little bit of yard work as well.
Okay, all right, great. Alex, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Alex. I also teach literacy and low beginning at Dorcas, as well as an advanced course on Saturdays. And to me, since my birthday is in spring, I think that spring has always represented new beginnings to me. You know, things starting again, a new year for me, you know, fresh starts.
I love it. Okay, can you choose somebody else? Can you choose the next person?
All right, let's go with Jennifer. Keep it in the family.
Alex, I'm Jennifer. I'm also from Dorcas, and I teach low intermediate ESOL. And for me, spring is my favorite season, and I think of it as just because it's a transition period. I really enjoy the in-between of things.
Beautiful. Yeah. All right. Can you choose someone?
Sure. How about Luz Lenny?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Luz Lenny. I work with beginners at Dorcas International Institute. Spring for me is colors, represent colors and beautiful and nice weather.
Yeah, we hope, right? Fingers crossed. All right. Thanks, Liz Lenny. Appreciate that. Can you choose somebody, Liz Lenny?
Okay, and the next one is going to be Nidia. Hello, Nidia. You are the next one.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I cannot put my camera because I'm on the street right now, coming back to home.
Okay, no problem, Nidia.
So I work at Dorcas too. I'm teaching high beginner level. And spring for me, it's I don't know, it's like the beauty of everything is alive again. So it's amazing for me, spring.
I love that. Okay, and I can't ask you to choose someone because that would be so unfair since you can't.
Yeah, so I don't know who talked already. That's why.
That's no problem. No problem.
Sorry.
So, that's okay. So I will choose Elizabeth, please.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I also work at Dorcas, and so far at Dorcas, I've only taught high, intermediate, and advanced, but I'm hoping in the future I can teach a few lower level classes. Spring, I just went on a really lovely walk today, and I felt like a Jane Austen character. So I feel like this is like the season of going on lovely walks, and also ticks.
Yeah. Right, the pros and the cons, right? Yes. Gotcha. Okay, and Elizabeth,
Yes.
I imagine that would you choose someone else?
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. What about Camille?
Yes, thank you. I teach low level ESL at Dorcas as well. And I teach 2 classes. And spring, I'm with Elizabeth about the ticks because I have pets. So I immediately was just thinking that today, like, oh no, time to get our tick protection. And yeah, so I share that with you. And yeah, the beautiful flowers. And I think also of vegetables. I like making a lot of like soups in spring. With the vegetables, asparagus and fresh peas and so forth, things like that. Yeah, like healthy, nice foods.
Beautiful. I love that. Oh, getting me excited here. All right. And I think we have Claudia, Bryn, and Leslie left. So if you could choose one of them, and Joan, of course. Joan, if you want to tell us too.
I can go next if
Yeah.
it's okay. So
Thank
hi, everybody. My name is Claudia. I'm from Progreso Latino. I have a lot going on in my background, so that's why my camera is off. We're always busy here at Progreso. So I am the co-director of education. I also oversee the ESOL program, and I have taught beginner levels of ESOL as well as advanced levels. So I'm looking forward to today. What spring means for me, baseball and the Red Sox. I'm all about baseball and the Red Sox.
Fantastic. I love that. And you maybe didn't see before, Claudia, but Joan had her Boston Red Sox hat on. So you're in good company here.
Oh, there we go. Great job, Joan.
So
Nice.
I will unmute just to sort of explain it. I guess that wouldn't have been my first comment on spring, but I'm fortunate to be able to sit where there are windows, and at this time of day the sun comes in. So when Susan entered the room here, I had my hat on. I'm sitting like this, and I look like the fan of the century, right? So anyway, but I like baseball. I guess the other thing about spring that as soon as you ask the question, I've thought of is the flowers and the bushes that start to bloom, and I'm really looking forward to that. So
nice. I love it.
And I think was Bryn one of the people that
I think Bryn is next.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bryn. I teach a few different beginner classes. One is at the Pawtucket Library. And then also I teach in Norwich, adult education, and at Rural. And spring to me is my son just started to walk. So it's going to mean a lot of chasing him around outside all spring long. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
Nice.
And I call on, is Leslie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie. I work at the East Providence Library, and I teach a number of classes from beginner through a sort of high intermediate. And similar to Bryn, I am spending a lot of my time with a 2-year-old, so I'm looking forward to discovering spring through her eyes.
Nice. Very nice. All right. And thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And this actually, we had a Zoom class today. I teach in a hybrid program. So I teach 2 days a week in person and 1 day on Zoom. And today, typically we have small groups. When we're on Zoom, I split up the time so that I have 45 minutes with one group and 45 minutes with another group, rather than doing an hour and a half with the whole group. Because as you all know, with beginners, it's having smaller groups sometimes goes a lot better and makes a lot more sense. And we did the same exercise in the same way, sort of popcorn style. So one word that represents spring for you. What does spring mean for you? So they were a lot of similar answers, actually, which was interesting. Even with limited vocabulary in most cases, in all cases, really. All right, so let's start here. Let's dive in. Okay, so just to make sure you're all in the right place, the title today is Exploring Teaching Practices that Support Beginning ESOL Learners. And really, you know, we talk about teaching practices, but obviously it goes without saying that learning starts with the learner. And secondarily, instruction supports learning, right? So, question for you. What motivates students to persist in learning? You know, our adult learners, what motivates students to persist in learning? I'd love for you, if you can unmute yourselves if that feels most comfortable. You can write in the chat. You know, what in your mind motivates your students to persist?
Often I think it's like an end goal, like a very practical end goal, like getting a better job, getting a new job, earning more money.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. And Bryn saying interacting with others in the class. Great. Other thoughts, Luzleni?
That they can talk to the teachers, because almost all of them have students, have children, and they have to talk to the teachers, help them with the homework, and read reports, check with the teachers, and they said, teacher, we need help because really we don't understand the reports that the teacher send us. And for that reason, I think that they always like to learn more English because they like to understand everything.
Yeah, I think that's great. And similar to what Elizabeth was saying, you know, really kind of having a specific purpose, right? How can this be a vehicle to other things in their lives? Yes, absolutely. Nidia is saying having useful knowledge. Claudia, you have your hand raised. Do you want to jump in here?
Sure. I wanted to say it's a necessity to live, to function in the United States. As everyone else has already mentioned, to help their children in school, to be able to communicate at work, to communicate with one another, build community, all of that. It's just it's a need.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I was going to say help them move forward in their in life, to help them move forward with jobs and so forth, and as well as being able to communicate as needed in society.
Yeah, absolutely, Camille. Yeah, thank you so much. And you may be familiar, just to jump ahead here, you may be familiar with this study already by the New England Literacy Resource Center. But there was a research project done, I guess about 6 or 7 years ago now, and I'll pop the link into the chat here in a moment. But these were in many cases, you know, mirroring exactly what you said. These were the 6 drivers of persistence that those studies revealed: and sense of belonging, clarity of purpose, agency, competence. So really seeing themselves as, you know, being able to do this, to be a student, you know, many of whom, you know, may be coming to our programs for this is their first formal education, or they've been away from the classroom for a long time. So really, you know, kind of seeing themselves as learners, relevance to their lives, as many of you said, and stability. So predictability, reliability. Yeah. So we're really going to be looking today at, you know, what are what are the teaching practices that connect to these drivers of persistence? What do we know about adult learners, and what do we know are the teaching practices that support adult learners? So over our next couple of sessions here, today and then on April 4th, we're going to be looking at how we can make our instruction relevant and inclusive of all learners. So we'll be talking about, creating community, choosing relevant content, how we create an engaging environment for all learners. And a couple of you mentioned that I sent out a survey in advance of our session, and it's not too late to do that, by the way, if you didn't have a chance to do it. So no worries whatsoever. But some of you mentioned this as well, how can I meet the needs of all my learners? How do we challenge and support each of our diverse learners? So this is about, scaffolding and differentiation. And we'll be talking mostly about that on April 4th. And then how do we set learners up for success in independent learning? So, how do we teach learning strategies? How do we tap into what our students already know and help them to kind of maximize that? And how do we do this with beginners, right? With limited language in some cases, but not limited experience, right? And limited knowledge. All right. So that said, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is cultivating an inclusive community. So this is a quote that I really, really love. I came across it right at the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, it's Dave Stewart Jr. He's a K through 12 English teacher, and I follow his blog. And I'd just like you to read it, and then maybe just either say aloud or pop into the chat. What are some of the words that kind of stand out for you?
Safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Humanized, valued, known. Okay. All right. Great. All right. So what does safety have to do with learning? So, this is our brain. This is a brain. And the little green area here is the amygdala. So when we're talking about safety as it relates to learning, we're really thinking about, what happens when, a student is feeling really overloaded, either in life or in the classroom. They're sort of in this fear state, which is often the case with adult learners. As we all know, our students have so much going on in their lives, and sometimes they come into the classroom and it's hard to stay focused or get focused. And so when the amygdala is triggered, when there's cortisol flooding the body, oftentimes, and I'm sure you've heard this term before, students can be in this state of amygdala hijack, right? So we think about, what can we do to, sort of lower that effective filter? And when you're in this state of amygdala hijack, it's very hard, almost impossible, probably, to really be open to learning. And so what is kind of the remedy for that? So we're going to think about that together here for just about 3 or 4 minutes, maybe. And Joan, if you could you open up maybe breakout rooms with maybe 2 or 3 people, and we're just going to think about can you remember a time when this happened to you or a student, And then think about what helped you or your students. So, we've probably all experienced this, as have our students. So think about a time when that happened to your student, and then think about what helped you or your student. All right, so we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe 5 groups or 4 groups. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So we'll just take a few minutes, maybe 4 minutes, and then we'll come back together. And I'm with Claudia probably, right, Joan? There we go. Oh, I can't hear you. There you are.
All right, I forgot about, yeah, I also know we're on recording. Actually, everyone's in a room at this point, and yes, you were in a room, but there are 2 people in that room, so it's up to you whether you want to go there.
Okay, that sounds good. Should I pause the recording for a moment? All right, everybody, as I'm sure that was not sufficient time, and I'm sorry about that. This is always the case in Zoom world, right? Anything that anyone wanted to share that came up in terms of what supports that amygdala hijack? What sort of helps with fight or flight? Or maybe you only got to the first part. Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
In my case, it was once I had identified the student who was experiencing that, having like an emergency one-on-one conference was what she needed, where I asked her to stay so that we could have a talk in writing and then in person. First it was texts and then it was in person. And so having the one-on-one was what she needed to feel like safe and that she deserved to be at this level in the class because of a challenging activity for her.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so really reaching out to her, connecting with her. Yeah, just kind of brought that affective filter down for her. Yeah, beautiful. Anyone else want to share? Okay, yeah, Claudia, jump in here.
Sure. So I was sharing my story, not me as a teacher, but me as a student. In my breakout room, I shared that when I came to the United States, I was 6 years old and I didn't speak a word of English. And so I was the kid in the back of the classroom that my teacher had no idea what to do with me because she didn't speak Spanish and I didn't speak English. And it was, I guess, during the I don't know what the period of time was called, but there was a lot of Central Americans coming to the United States as refugees because of the conflict in Guatemala and the Civil War and such. And so I was one of those kids that came. And as a child, I remember just being afraid to walk into the classroom because I couldn't communicate with anyone. And I perceived any form of communication as a threat because I didn't understand. Yeah. And there are certain things that, as a child, you pick up on body language and facial expressions. And I relied on that to try to determine, is this a positive interaction? Is this a negative interaction? It can be scary when you're 6 years old. Well, it's no different when you're older and you are learning a language. And so I'm thankful for having that experience because now as a ESOL teacher, I remember what it's like, and to be very cautious or what's the word I'm looking for? Aware of how I interact and how safe my students feel, and to be very cautious of my response and feedback, because even if, like you probably just heard, I kind of like chuckle or giggle, and that, whatever. And that in an ESOL classroom can be perceived as mocking, or, my teacher,
Right.
he laughed
Right.
at me or whatever. And so I come with that experience and with that in the back of my mind to be able to provide the best feedback possible, so that my students can feel safe and not feel like I felt when I was, 6 years old.
Yeah.
And what helps with that is,
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you there, Claudia. I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to appreciate you for sharing that experience, and what incredible awareness to be bringing, from your own personal experience. And we all bring, our own personal experiences as well, whether it's, exactly as you've described, or from something else. But what a gift for your students as well, that you are aware of this, and that you use your own experience to really meet them where they are, and respond to what is supportive of them.
thank you. I try to do that, and I don't ever want to forget. In fact, one of the things that has helped me not forget is I'm trying to learn a fourth language. I'm trying really hard to learn Turkish, because I have this in my head that I want to go to Turkey someday. Oh, and in self-learning, I realized, one, how difficult it is to learn another language as an adult, and two, how scary it can be to put yourself out there in a community that's completely different from your own, to say, hey, I want to learn how to speak like you. And it's terrifying, but that's what our students feel. And for us to give ourselves as professionals those opportunities to experience what it's to be in their shoes, to experience that too, to feel what they feel, is crucial.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really, really appreciate your insight there, and your suggestions as well, in terms of what's supportive. And we're going to be talking about a couple of things that you mentioned, that you named there, and Jennifer, you as well. I appreciate your input as well. That was, just in terms of just simply connecting, with your student, reaching out to your student. And so we'll be talking about that here. And I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing what you've learned. So let me share my screen again here. And so the question, the question that we're going to be looking at, let me just make sure I did the wrong thing there. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go, view. All right, so the first question we're going to be looking at is, how do we cultivate an affirming and inclusive community? And there's so much to be said here, but the first thing is related to what you were saying, Jennifer. Make it a priority to build relationships, connect, right, and using that trust as a a relationship builder, and then drawing on student experience and expertise. So really, just in any ESOL classroom, in any adult classroom, in any classroom, really, arguably, the teacher is not the only expert in the room, right? Particularly with adult learners, they're bringing a lifetime of experiences. And so drawing on, not only asking what do students need, but what are students bringing with them? What are their strengths? So we'll be looking at that. So just some images of relationship building. This is pre-pandemic, my classroom pre-pandemic, my Zoom classroom. And then relationship building can happen on WhatsApp as well. So thinking about, and I don't know if those of you who are teaching remotely, or even those of you who are teaching in person, are using WhatsApp as a tool with your learners. But I found it really, really incredibly helpful for beginning learners. It's even students with very, very limited literacy and digital literacy, this is a tool that's familiar to them and accessible to them, and it's brilliant. And we'll be talking about this later as well, when we get into scaffolding and differentiation, and working with literacy learners, or students who may have very limited written English. WhatsApp is a brilliant thing as well, because you can you can use the audio feature, you can take pictures, so there are many ways in, many modalities in terms of connecting with students. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, getting back to that Dave Stewart Jr. quote about feeling valued, known, respected, and safe. And, just jumping off of piggybacking on what you were sharing, Claudia, and what you shared, Jennifer, that's going to be different for all of our students. So thinking about, what does this student need from me? And so I've thought about, setting up a simple system for keeping in touch with my students. So in my case, it's just, taking their attendance sheet and, creating something like what you see on the right here with their names, the date, kind of a well-being check, just making sure that I'm kind of touching base with all of my students. When you're in the classroom, that's happening, as students come in, as students leave, at break time. But on Zoom, you have to be a lot more intentional about it. So, as you were saying, Jennifer, writing a simple text to let a student know, that you're thinking about them, or connecting with them, making eye contact during the class, right? Or, just simple things that build relationship, between the teacher and the student. And then in the case of Zoom, establishing some consistent office hours. So maybe opening your Zoom class 15 minutes early, so that students know that they can come in and talk with you individually. Or you mentioned this, Jennifer, scheduling one-on-one conferences. So I want to hear in a moment as well about what you're doing. But this is just a simple system that I've been using recently to make sure I'm kind of keeping track of all of my students. Another thing with beginners is really teaching vocabulary for feelings immediately. And so intentionally teaching and talking about feelings. So this is an example of something I do on Zoom, and I sort of elicit the emotion, the adjective from the student. But you could do it in person as well. And many of you, when we were connecting before on the questionnaire, a couple of people mentioned that one of the challenges is working with literacy learners. And so obviously using visuals, this allows many ways in. A student doesn't have to read in order to participate in this exercise. They could say number one, right? Or they could say the word, and they don't have to read what's below. Or if a student has a lot of background noise and they can't unmute themselves, they could just hold up a finger. So it really allows a lot of access points. And then something, kind of taking this idea a step further, not just saying, how are you feeling today, but also giving students, sort of more. So giving them, I found it really helpful, in helping students to connect with one another, to give them sort of some very simple sentence stems. So, student A, how are you feeling? Student B, I feel sad. And then an opportunity to elaborate on that, right? Not just stopping there, because that's kind of awkward and probably wouldn't happen in normal conversation. If someone said they felt sad, you'd probably want to know more, right? And so in our class, we decided on why. My husband's sick, for example. And then giving students language. So in our class, we decided on, I'm sorry to hear that, or if it's a positive emotion, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And this is sort of a ritual in our class. We do sort of a circle. So if we're in the physical space, with one another, we stand in a circle and we go from person to person. So it's not teacher directed necessarily. I may kick it off. I may, say to a student, how are you feeling? And we'll go through this. But then that student would check in with somebody else. So it's not, me as a teacher, asking each student. All right. And you mentioned this, Claudia, when you were sharing about your own experience, but really kind of understanding, understanding where different students are coming from, and meeting them where they are, and sort of understanding what their preferences are for relating. I think that was such an insightful comment. Is there anything in particular, as you read this comment, and this is from Zaretta Hammond, some of you may be familiar with her wonderful book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. If you don't have it, it's one of my favorite books that I've read over the past couple of years. Is there anything in particular that stands out to you about this quote that you just wanted to take note of? You can either jot it down on a piece of paper, or you can share it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
I would say what stands out is the importance of relationships in teaching.
Mm-hmm.
That we tend to focus on the curriculum. What are we going to teach? What do my students need to learn? What do they want to learn? But really, just as important is building relationships and having the students feel confident and safe in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Love that. Okay. So we're going to just, we'll look at a couple of ideas here. This is something that I did in my classroom. So we started out, and this was closer to the beginning of the year. So talking about values, what's important to you. And I showed them, I didn't show them all of these, but I chose a few, and then I asked students to circle their top three. And then eventually we, got down to, so, okay, what is your number one value that you see here? And everyone chose their favorite. And we used it as a way of kind of understanding where we were similar, where we shared similar values. And then we took it a step further. And many of you are probably doing this in your classroom, but talking about what do we as a classroom community value? What are our values? And then we sort of transferred this, to this list. So we used, again, the just simple be verb, right? So these are the things that are important in our community. And some of them you'll see reflected here, and some of them we came up with on our own. And then another part of really helping students to feel valued and known is pronouncing their names correctly, right? So insisting on correct pronunciation of a student's name, and but also going beyond that and kind of understanding about somebody's name as well. It's such an important part of our identity. And so this exercise in particular, this is something that I did remotely with students. So this is a word wall game. So each of these is a window, and they open up a window. And we did it as a conversation game, but you could do it in person as well. And this in particular, the questions that you'll see here, they come from, or they were inspired by a group in Boston that does work on culturally responsive teaching. And so I just kind of made the questions a little bit more accessible to our students. But it really generated a great conversation. And then we transferred this to a written exercise as well. And so this is just an example of one of my students' reflections. All right. And then drawing on student experience. So really using student experience as content, very simple example here, right? We were talking, this is in a jobs unit, and we were talking about our jobs, what do you do? And then we played a game with it. It was almost, where students had to match the name of their classmate to the job that they do. And then another idea around, tapping into what students know, student strengths. So asking students to share mental health strategies. And this was done via WhatsApp. And this student in particular was a low literacy learner. And so she actually sent me an audio file. So she sent me a picture and an audio file. And then I transcribed it for her. But other students, sent me a picture of their written text. All right. So we're going to go into groups again for a few minutes. And I'd love for you to think about, maybe you saw something here that you're already working with or already doing. Or maybe you have another idea about ways that you work in your class to help students to feel known, valued, respected, and safe. So what are some of the classroom practices? We just spoke about building relationships. We spoke about using student experience and expertise and drawing on that in the classroom. So I'd love for you to talk just about 5 minutes with each other about some of the ideas that you're using in your classroom. All right, so Joan, I think we'll do the same thing if that's okay. Maybe groups of 2 or 3, maybe groups of 3 this time, just so we have some variety. So I think that'd be 3 groups of 3 and 1 of 2, if I'm not adding incorrectly. Thank you so much, Joan. Could be difficult for, complete beginners. And I just wanted to assure you that I also have a mixed level group. I have some literacy learners and some students who have no background at all in English. And then I go up to, I think there's someone in the group, I think it may be you, Elizabeth, who has the exact same levels as I do, just sort of 0 through 3. So there's a lot of, maybe that was you, Elizabeth, maybe it was somebody else. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but it's interesting. Yeah. So in other words, a real mix of students in our classroom. And I was saying to Alex, we'll speak about that the next time, about scaffolding and providing students with support so that they can access material at any level and what that looks like. So we'll sort of tap into the collective wisdom around that next time for sure. So have no fear. I totally acknowledge that. Thank you. All right. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about, and we'll talk about this, for the next 25 minutes now, is choosing meaningful content. So what is content that's relevant to students' lives? And so how do we teach what's relevant to our students? So the first thing we're going to be looking at is learning about students' goals and needs. So really asking students, at whatever level they're at, even if they have very limited English skills, about their goals and their needs and how that's possible, with a complete beginning learner. And then using student-generated content. And we've talked a little bit about this, and some of you were talking about this in your groups. And thirdly, making those connections explicit. So, really, letting students know and eliciting from students, how will you use this? So we're learning this in class. How will you use this outside of the classroom? So we're going to look at it, look at this exercise through the WH questions. And we talked before about not only looking at students' needs, but also what are students already bringing? What are some of the strengths that they're bringing? Some of you are working with, low literacy learners, and so this can be a great thing to bring in, something that, either on Zoom or in person, where a student really could just point to what's most important to them. And then also, and this would be more of a discussion if you were working with a low literacy learner, but what's easiest for you, right? What comes easily to you? And then what's most difficult for you? And then what can you do to improve your English? So this is something that I talk with students a lot about, and we'll talk next time about that, learning strategies. And working outside of the classroom, independent learning. And then what can I, as your teacher, do to help you? And I used a lot of visuals for these conversations so that I'm sure that the student—
Can you show us some?
I would be delighted to show you some. Yes, I will make note of that.
I'm thinking the question is the hardest part. Most of the time when we ask a student, what's more important to you? And they're like, English, speak English, better English. And that's as far as you can get with them. And so you say, well, talking, listening, reading, or writing. And they go, English, teacher, English. You can't even get them to narrow this down.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. And let me just go back to this one. Okay. So this one could help with that potentially, but I hear you that sometimes students will say everything, right?
If they haven't been to school, They don't know what grammar is or why it's
Right.
important.
Right. And that may be the case. That may be the case. And you know, some students that will be the case. But I think the other thing that I wanted to say about this is, you know, needs assessment could be something you do on intake with a student, right? It could be something you do really early on in your conversation with a student. But what I'm learning with my students is I'm coming back to these conversations all the time, right? So I'm not asking once, I'm asking several times. So maybe, yes, the first time you talk with a student, you know, they may say everything. But as you get to know them more, and you can see, you know, what their strengths are, and maybe you're having a one-on-one conference with them at some point, as I do with my students kind of quarterly throughout the year. I work with students throughout the whole year, the same group. And, you know, so maybe I'll have a quarterly conference with a student, and I'm asking this question again, you know, now what's most important to you? You know, what's good? You know, where are you seeing your English improve? And what do you need? What do you need? And so you're right. You know, grammar may not be the right question for every student, but maybe you'd have a couple of versions of this, and you'd be able to, you know, sort of give them some feedback on what you've observed, and, you know, see if your understanding is aligned with what the student's understanding of their strengths is, if that makes sense. I absolutely hear you, Deborah. And I think, and I'm going to make note because it would be the other visuals that I'm talking about that relate to these questions. I have them in another folder. So because of the level of tech savvy that I have, which is super low, it would take me too long to get there. So I promise I'll either send you them so that you can see them, or I'll be sure to revisit it. But thank you for the question. It's a great one. Absolutely. And we'll be talking more, and I want to hear from all of you around, you know, what are some of the visuals that you're using? I was talking in a breakout room to Alex about gestures, and I want to come back to that the next conversation as well. These are all things that are particularly, they're helpful at all levels of teaching ESOL, but for beginners, they're just, you know, things that we sort of know as beginning teachers is so important, for sure. So the other one is connecting to purpose, as we were talking about before, right? Where do you need to speak English outside of the classroom? So understanding that about your student, you know, do they have a job? Do they need to know English at work? You know, I know somebody mentioned earlier talking with their child's teacher. Is that their most important activity? Is it at the doctor's office? Right? So I might do this as a matching exercise. I might do it, you know, with the whole group. You know, it really depends on you know, the format that I was working with students in. And then why do you want to learn English? So these, you know, if I was working with a literacy learner, I would be kind of interviewing the student, or I would have a partner interview the student and record their answer. But this one I did, I asked students to reflect on as a written exercise. Just elaborate a little bit more. Okay. And then this is related to the second point that we were going to talk about, which is around student-generated content. And if you're not already familiar with this resource, I just wanted to draw your attention to the Minnesota Literacy Project. Are others familiar with that? Yes, nodding heads there. Yes. It's such a great resource. I use it constantly. In fact, when I was teaching exclusively on Zoom, I would, in addition to the textbook that all of my students had, I would, they had physical copies of the textbook, because as we know, for beginners, it's important to know that you're on the same page, like literally, figuratively, all of it, right? We need to know page 1. Everybody's looking at page 1, right? Are we on the same page? And I would send students a packet from Minnesota Literacy Project as well. There's a story bank that's wonderful for, that's free. You can download from their website. And so this is a literacy level poetry unit from Minnesota Literacy Project. And this was a unit that we were doing on identity. And we weren't doing it at the beginning of the year, because as you can imagine, these are not things that my students could produce at the beginning of the year. This is something that we actually just did in January. And we'd been talking about, as Deborah, as you were sharing before, many students don't have context for grammar, right? And so part of what I do in my classroom to help them then go on to other levels is talking about things are, what is an adjective? What is a verb? And really kind of developing a language around that so that students can sort. And I'm not doing it right away, but as ways of sorting vocabulary that we learn. And so in our case here, we're talking about adjectives and what adjectives describe you. What do you like? What are you afraid of? What do you need? And the unit was called Who Are You? And so we did this in interview style, and obviously, this particular exercise was something that we built up to over the course of a few weeks. But ultimately, this is just an example of what one of my students was able to produce with some sentence stems and some support, and many versions.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it was a great exercise. And then this is another idea for, very simple idea for student generated content, show and tell. And you can do this on Zoom. This one was on Zoom, for example. So instead of bring something you use every day, it was send me a picture of something you use every day. And then I projected the pictures. And then we worked together to make sentences. So we were talking about the simple present. Another exercise we did, Martin Luther King Day. So I was working with students, and this one in particular, I don't recall where this is from. I think I'll find the source. I meant to put it down. I've used it so many years in a row that now I can't remember where I got it from. But it might be actually from News ELA. And I chose, the simplest version of it. And as a way of, talking about Martin Luther King, and then, transferring that to students' own experience. And then a couple of you mentioned teaching vocabulary. And this was a fun exercise that we did together again. What do you do every day? And I had students send a picture, and then we created a dictionary together on Quizlet in this case. But you could certainly do this. You could certainly do this in person and have it on your classroom wall, or you could do it, with photocopies of students' pictures. And we came up with sentences together. So I walk my dog, I cook, I pray, and then finally, making connections explicit. So I try to remember to ask myself when I'm planning a class, when and where will the students use this outside of class, and why are we spending time on this? Is this really important? Is this a good use of my students' time?
Ugh.
And then at the end of class, asking students, when and where will you use this outside of class, right? So if we're talking even about something like spelling, right? Spell your name or spell your address. Where do you need to spell? Where do you need to spell? And, student might say, well, when talking on the phone, right? If I'm making a doctor's appointment or talking to my doctor, spelling the name, right? That can help to make an appointment. And then thinking about, this is more from, teacher view, right? What grammar do my students need to communicate effectively in these contexts? So think about, talking with their child's teacher about summer plans. What would you say? What kind of grammar would a student need to know in order to talk effectively with their teacher, with their child's teacher? Any thoughts? Maybe the simple future, maybe there's certain vocabulary, maybe going to participate in a job interview. Think about the kind of grammar that a student might need to know. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But what would they need to be able to say? And that might help me to plan my lesson effectively. Describing symptoms to a doctor. And this is something that I just wanted to share as a practice that I have with my class. And this is just kind of building the language for student reflections. I want to know from my student, what was the most helpful for you? So we talk about, what did we do today? What did we do today? So maybe we've done 5 activities, and in their own words, I ask them to share it with me or show me or tell me, and then I write them down. These maybe weren't necessarily their own words, right? So reviewing the homework, show and tell, new vocabulary. What are some of the new words that we learned today? Maybe practicing verbs in the present. So then I ask them to tell me, to vote, right? And if we're in person, they'll put a star, on the board next to the thing that they liked the most, or maybe they'll choose 2 things. And that gives me good information about what's most important to my students and maybe what we do again. And sometimes, maybe it's a bingo game, that we've done that students want to practice more or liked the most. And so that can help to inform, what I spend time on as a teacher. All right, so I know that was super quick, but these are the things that we talked about just now in this section. And just for I guess we've got some time. So maybe if it's okay, I'd love for you to just, I know that was a lot of different ideas, but I'd love to hear, what are you currently doing? How are you choosing meaningful, content that's meaningful to your students? So let's spend about 5 minutes in the group, and then we'll come back together and debrief, and then talk about, what's up for April 4th. So let's just do maybe about the same distribution, if you could, Joan.
May have touched it and messed it up a little bit. You know what? Let me just. Sorry, you may get a slightly different group. I'm just going to put 3 people in a group. Yeah. Just because I want to make sure there's enough people in the groups, and I'm getting I don't know, it's giving me something weird. Let's just say, how's that? Okay, try this.
Great. We're out. There we go. So some of what came up was just this idea of, and we all know this with any of our students, but for beginning students in particular, lots of repetition. You know, we all know this, right? Beneficial for all of us, that recycling. And we had there were some great ideas. I'd love for you to mention, Jennifer, your idea that you had about show and tell.
Right now?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. We were studying the verb make. And so I was trying to do like every Wednesday show and tell warm up. And so it was that people either show something or give me a video or a picture of something that they have made. And so somebody sent me a video of him making cabinets at work. Someone else used to make jewelry, so she had that. I like to paint, so I had like a little painting. So that's how we got to know each other more and our different talents and interests.
I love that. Any other ideas that came up in the group that you wanted to share, or any other challenges, you know, with any of this, that anyone wanted to share? Okay. And one of the things, you know, that many of you, the points that many of you have raised that we will come back to in a big way the next time we talk on April 4th is about, you know, meeting students where they are and providing supports for learners, you know, based on what their strengths are, based on, you know, where they need more support. And using multiple modalities. So whether it's audio, you know, Jennifer, I know you mentioned dialogue journaling, and I was thinking, as you said, you know, WhatsApp is a great tool for that. If students are familiar with that, you know, doing an audio journal or you know, even you know, responding to a question prompt or something really simple, and you know, that all learners can access, you know, if they know how to use WhatsApp. Which you know, I find I say WhatsApp, and my students also have very low digital literacy, but I say WhatsApp because I find that students are already using it in their personal lives. So it's a good one for that reason. It's not Google Classroom. It's not not email, right? It's something that students are already using. So, all right, I'm sorry, I'm conscious of time here, so I'll wrap up. But let me put in the chat as well. We talked about drivers of persistence, so I wanted to give you that, a link to that research if you're interested in that. And also, that's the website. And this is like just a summary document, which is one page, if that's what you have space for in your life, and you want to you want to look at something shorter. The second link is a shorter one. And thank you again for carving out the time today, for all of your great ideas and conversation, and sharing the challenges that you have as well. And as I said, we'll do our best to address those in the next session as well, where we're going to be talking about scaffolding and differentiation. We're going to be talking about learning strategies for independent learning. And if there are things in particular that you want to make sure that we try to incorporate, please, you know, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to weave it into our conversation next time. So thanks everybody, and thanks for being on a couple extra minutes here too.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time. See you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.